My job is, or at least was, working for a low-budget storage company. You find a lot of strange things that people leave behind in this sort of job. Mostly junk, sometimes valuables. Occasionally my company, Deep Storage, would do an auction for things people left behind, but mostly they would not bother. Instead, it would be my job to go in and clear out the abandoned units and get them ready for the next customer. It was a decent living, at least until last week. When I found that damn radio, I had just arrived at work to start my shift. I walked up to the front gate and entered the code out of habit. When nothing happened, I groaned. Remembering the electronic gate was broken and I was not sure when or if it would be fixed. I fumbled for the old key I had been given and unlocked the adjacent gate and stepped into the storage facility. The large padlock slipped off and clattered to the ground as the gate swung open with hinges as rusty as the rest of the dilapidated facility. I laughed briefly when I considered the company's name. Deep Storage indeed. I guessed that since our prices were dirt cheap, it was the only thing that saved whatever meager business this place eked out. I was not even sure if there were other employees here, or if it was just me and the lot manager Tim, who never seemed to be around. I slipped the key back into my pocket and moved along. I found the building desolate as always. My footsteps were hollow in the quiet. It was a world of peeling paint, faded numbers, and bolts so old they flaked red onto the ground. As I walked along toward the unit I was looking for, my boots managed to find every crevice and fracture. The concrete was old and weary. Like many things in the rundown place, I wondered if it would ever be fixed. I kept a steady pace. My shift had just started and I was in no rush. I did find myself wishing it had not been so quiet. The sound of isolation, the echo of nothing except my own footsteps, was disquieting. I was annoyed at myself for forgetting to charge my headphones as I realized that the lonely ambience would likely be my only companion that day, unless I happened upon an actual person. The small circuit I walked revealed more of the storage units. Rust bloomed like a disease, spreading from corners and hinges. The numbers, once bold and bright, now faded. Looking at the degradation, I was glad that I had a recent tetanus shot. I still could not believe people would be desperate enough to even use this place to store whatever junk they couldn't live without. I guess I couldn't say much. I had to work in this mess after all. When I had started working here, I had thought the solitude might be nice. Yet now I found myself bored and slightly lonesome. Nothing stirring except the cold wind outside and the thoughts in my head. I walked deeper into the facility. Looking at a nearby unit, I was close. It was into the 100s, so I was almost to my destination. The rows of storage units stretched out in long corridors. Size was the one thing that this place did not skimp on, though it was tedious walking the grounds sometimes. The units stood shoulder to shoulder, monotonously watching me as I walked between them. Then I came upon Unit 149. It had a note left by Tim, the lot manager, and indicated that this one was past the last notice for the owner to pay or clear out before we took possession. I managed to force upon the door, which was slightly stuck ever after unlocking it. Even in the gloom of the flickering overhead bulb, I could see how thoroughly someone had made a mess of the place. Debris littered the floor. Papers lay torn or trampled, or water warped into crisp waves. A pattern was drawn on the wall, likely some kind of graffiti. I rubbed a finger over it and relaxed when I realized it was chalk and not paint, easier to clean up. The more I looked around, the clearer it became that I'd stumbled upon someone's obsession. Old books were stacked along the walls of the unit and falling out of crumbling boxes. The spines of the books bore weird titles and strange symbols that looked like something out of the occult. Their dusty fragrance coated the air, blending with the metallic tang of metal and wires strewn about like the aftermath of an explosion. Bits of brass and rusted tools caught the overhead's sickly light. It seemed as if whoever was using the unit had been building or repairing something. At least they were before it was just left abandoned. I found the clash between the weird books, odd chalk symbols, and the metal scrap rather jarring. I might have been overthinking it, but it was stranger than usual. Most units filled up slowly, at a pace their owners never admitted was trash. But not this one. Not when scattered across the room were papers with hastily scribbled notes and diagrams, tapestries of ideas pinned haphazardly to the walls. with a floor littered with open books, their pages marked with frantic underlines and exclamation points. Whoever had used this space had been driven by an almost manic sense of purpose, evident in the chaotic yet intentional arrangement of every item. I took a closer look at the weird outline. The lines of chalk had tracked like footprints across the walls and floor. Diagrams wove among the chaos, haunting like disembodied veins. Lines dissected the walls, racing and looping before coming to blunt ends. Strings of symbols strayed into forgotten corners. There was a symmetry to them, a rhythm that made me wonder if they'd been left behind to be found. Near the far wall, I stumbled onto an arrangement that looked less haphazard than the rest. Some of the books had been opened and left like cracked doors, a circled pattern showing through from one page to the next. I paused over it, my own breath loud in the stale air. A high-pitched tone pricked at me from somewhere above, then vanished just as quickly. I stood perfectly still, waiting for it to come again, almost wishing it would. But there was nothing except the rattle of the faulty light and the drum of my own heart. The whole room vibrated with an unsettling silence, the kind that made it impossible to think clearly. I could not explain why, but something about how everything was left here felt wrong. When I navigated through the towers of boxes, my eyes fixed on what lay in the center of the storage unit, an antique radio. It looked like someone had brought the thing straight from the 1940s. The thing was perched atop an old end table, laying there like it was afraid I wouldn't see it. Even from across the room, I could tell how strangely new it looked. Shiny mahogany and glass, free from the layers of grime and rot that smothered everything else. I couldn't believe someone would leave that thing behind. Whoever had used Unit 149 must have been a little eccentric. The strange drawings, books, and radio made it seem like maybe they were a conspiracy theorist or something. Whoever they were, they had lost it all now. It seemed strange they would go through all the effort to put all this here and then just abandon it. And now it was my job to clean up the mess. I felt certain there was an interesting story behind the markings and books, but mostly the pristine radio. There was something about its placement, the care with which it had been left, that piqued my interest. I told myself I should get the dolly and start carting the boxes of books out first. Yet I was too intrigued by the radio. I had to find out if it still worked, and if it did, see what it might be worth. I reached out to touch the dial and turn it on, and the radio vibrated with a weird anticipation. The odd feedback was strange. I brushed it off, and when I finally twisted the knobs, the speakers gave a pop and filled the air with static, louder than I expected and more urgent than I was ready for. I was about to turn off the device again, overwhelmed by the incessant white noise, but it finally picked up a signal. And the signal had a voice. It was no voice I had ever heard. It cracked in bursts, atonal and discordant, like the air was filled with bees. But as I drew it in, it got sharper. Less of a fuzz and more of a buzz. Less of a buzz and more of a plea. I pressed my ear close, so close I felt the hairs stand at attention. I had thought the static was deafening, but I was wrong. The clarity was worse.
Please, help.
It was subtle enough that I almost packed it up and pretended it was nothing but an echo in my own lonely brain. But the voice refused to die away. I thought it might be some sort of trick, maybe some secret recording device playing something back. The voice had a far-off quality to it, like it came from another time or place or dimension, warped and bent and heartbreaking. I was not sure why, but the more I listened, the more real it had sounded. I couldn't explain, except to say I knew the way a trapped animal knows a trap. It looped in on itself, an infinite reel of terror.
Please, help me.
I considered going to find Tim, but he was not there when I had arrived, and I was not sure if he would be at all that day. I thought about taking the strange radio to the police and seeing if they knew what to do, but something about the appeal of the voice compelled me to listen, like it was meant for me specifically and I alone could help. After all, there was no one else who could hear, no one else I could tell who would take it seriously. No one else but the radio and me, buzzing along in awful harmony. What was I supposed to do to help? And just who was I trying to help? I sat with my head in my hands and listened until I was too disturbed to listen anymore. I switched the radio off and the daze I was in broke. I stepped out of the storage unit to catch my breath. After a few moments, I composed myself and went back inside. I had to try and find out what was going on. I switched the radio back on. Static once again filled the room, bouncing off the cement walls and flooding every corner. I listened, waiting for something, knowing it would come, fearing what it might be. The voice broke through like a distant scream, louder this time, torn apart and stitched back together by the crackling ether. It wavered, rising and falling. My spine stiffened.
Help hurts, so hungry, please.
The desperate voice pleaded into the void and I listened, helpless to help, but painfully aware of whoever was in trouble and whatever might be happening to them. I stumbled backward, eyes fixed on the device. The situation felt surreal, impossible. And yet it was there, real as the dust motes swirling in the dim light. My fingers dug into the edge of the flimsy table the radio rested on, holding on to the world that was spinning out from under me. I had to do something. I had to try to communicate with them. But how? I had an idea just then. I grabbed the radio, searching its face with trembling hands, tracing the outline of its dials and switches. I turned it over, frantic and desperate, until I saw the frayed wires and the small section that was responsible for communication. To my dismay, the transmitter was damaged. The cries for help continued, and I tried to think what I could do. There was something I thought that might work. I returned to the storage lot's main office. To my luck, I found what I was searching for. An old ham radio. It was an old thing, battered and stained with grease, a relic of another time. Its knobs worn smooth, its faceplate scratched with the history of years gone by. Though the radio itself would not turn on, the transmitter looked intact, so I set about my work. I needed to understand. I needed to help. I needed to know who was calling and where they were. My hands moved with a purpose I barely recognized, setting up a workspace in the crowded storage unit. I had found a small toolbox, mostly used for repairs on the lot. I pried it open, rummaging through mismatched sockets and forgotten screwdrivers, pulling out the few items I needed to begin. Some other components like wire cutters were scavenged from Unit 149 itself, though most of the discarded bits in there were useless for my work. The work took a while. I was well versed in restoring electronics, but not with things that were quite this old. Though an odd kind of peace descended, eerie and consuming, as I lost myself in the repair. The world outside faded, shrinking to just the size of the radio and the size of the task at hand. I stripped the old wires and replaced them, careful not to pull too hard, too fast. Time slipped by unnoticed, marked only by the flickering bulb and the soft thud of my heart. The sound from the radio was gone after turning it off to repair. Yet the quiet felt worse, almost unbearably so. The absence of the voice drove me forward with an urgency I could not shake. I had to speak with them. I had to help. I finished the last connection, my hands stiff and sore, my mind a blur of tangled thoughts. The radio sat before me, repaired at least as far as I could see. The cry for help lingered in my mind, the desperate plea refusing to fade. I hoped that my plan would work. Only one way to know for sure now. I turned it on. The blare of static came through immediately. The connection sounded bad, and I almost shut it off again, thinking that I might have made it worse. Just as I was about to lose hope, the voice crept through, growing inside the noise, becoming human by slow degrees.
Help anyone, please.
The voice, the same desperate plea, reaching through layers of interference. It was a specter, thin and distorted, almost lost in the wall of static, but there, unmistakably there. The voice ebbed and flowed, swelling in strength only to break apart and dissolve into the relentless sea of sound.
Help, it hurts me. I'm here, all gone, they left.
They sounded desperate, and I had the means to try and help now. I picked up the newly repaired transmitter and attempted to respond. Hello? Who is there? How can I help? The static grew quieter somehow. A long pause made me consider if it had worked after all. Before I could try and repeat myself, I heard the voice again. The static finally lessened, revealing a voice that now seemed somehow clearer, more focused. It trembled with what I could only interpret as relief.
Me? You actually hear me?
The voice sounded feminine now, though strained and thin, as if speaking required tremendous effort.
Thank you. Thought no one ever find me.
I leaned closer to the transmitter, my pulse quickening. Yes, I hear you. Where are you? Who are you?
I don't know where am anymore.
The voice cracked, dissolving momentarily into static before returning, clearer than it had ever been before.
It's dark. So dark. I've been trapped in this place for so long. I don't even know how long.
How did you end up there? Where is it? Were you kidnapped? Let me know so I can send help. I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The radio hissed and popped in response.
No, I found something in the books. A doorway. A way through.
Her words came faster now, more desperate.
I thought I was so clever. I thought I'd discovered something no one else had. But it was waiting for me.
What was waiting? Who are you? I pressed the transmitter harder, as if physical pressure could somehow strengthen our tenuous connection.
My name is Rebecca. I rented this unit to study. It was the only place that was safe. The books, the symbols, they're all part of something bigger.
The static swelled momentarily, drowning her words before receding again.
There's a hunger here, in this place between places. It feeds on pus, on essence. Help me, I'm fading.
I looked around at the chalk markings with new understanding. They weren't random at all, they formed a pattern, a diagram, a door. How can I help you? What do I need to do? The urgency in my voice surprised even me. I could barely believe this was all happening. Yet the impossibility of the situation did little to dull my desire to help. The radio fell silent for so long I thought I'd lost her. Then, softer than before.
The ritual. You need to reverse it. The book with the red binding, on the far wall. Page 43.
My eyes scanned the chaos until I spotted it. A leather-bound volume, its spine the color of dried blood. I scrambled over boxes and debris, snatching it up with trembling hands. The book was heavier than I expected, its leather cover worn smooth in places, cracked and peeling in others. I flipped through the yellowed pages, each one covered in cramped handwriting and arcane diagrams that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. Page 43 revealed a complex circular pattern, not unlike the chalk markings on the walls, but more intricate. Notes in faded ink crowded the margins, some crossed out, others underlined multiple times. I found it, I said, returning to the radio, but I don't understand what I'm looking at.
The symbols need to be redrawn backwards.
Rebecca's voice was weaker now, fading in and out like a bad signal.
The words, pronounce them in reverse order. Hurry, I can feel it, coming closer.
What's coming closer? The question escaped before I could stop it. A burst of static erupted from the radio, so loud I had to cover my ears. When it subsided, Rebecca's voice had changed, lower, strangled, as if speaking through something thick.
Please, help me.
The hairs on my arms stood on end, and the air in the storage unit seemed to grow colder, heavier. I looked down at the book again, studying the symbols. They seemed familiar somehow, though I knew I'd never seen them before. My fingers traced the outline of the central figure, a twisted, inhuman shape with too many limbs and eyes that seemed to follow my gaze across the page. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. Was this poor girl stuck in there with that thing? My gaze darted to the chalk markings on the wall, seeing them with new clarity. I moved to the wall and hurriedly wiped away the old marking and replaced them with inversions of the previous patterns. I moved as fast as I could, spurred on by the anguished sounds of Rebecca on the radio. Something terrible was coming for her, and I had to get her out of there. The chalk dust clung to my sweaty fingers as I worked, each symbol requiring painstaking care to invert properly. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I found myself glancing over my shoulder at shadows that seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. The final symbol took shape under my trembling hand, a twisted glyph that resembled an eye with tendrils spiraling outward. Almost done, I called to the radio, my voice cracking with tension. Just one more line. The words from the book felt strange in my mouth as I pronounced them backward, each syllable slippery and wrong, like something that wasn't meant to be spoken by human tongues. The air in the storage unit grew dense, charged with an electricity that made my skin prickle and the hairs on my arms stand on end. As I completed the final reverse symbol, the radio erupted with a sound that wasn't static. It was something deeper, more primal. A scream that morphed into a roar, followed by Rebecca's voice, suddenly crystal clear and urgent.
"It's working,"
she cried.
"I can see light. I can feel myself coming back. Please, don't stop now. I need to get out of here."
The chalk markings began to glow with a sickly blue light, pulsing in rhythm with the desperate pleas coming from the radio. The temperature in the room plummeted so quickly that my breath came out in visible clouds. The pages of the book fluttered as if caught in a sudden breeze, though the air itself seemed stagnant, frozen. The glow from the symbols intensified, casting long, distorted shadows across the concrete floor. The door to the storage unit fell down on its tracks and slammed to the ground. Ignoring the distractions, I hoped the ritual was finally finished. Yet Rebecca's haunting cries pierced the silence once more, distorted again.
"One last step. Hurry, the radio can't get through. Take it somewhere. Anywhere better. Reception out of there."
Her voice echoed with a chilling urgency, as if the walls themselves were closing in, suffocating us in a desperate race against time. There had to be one last step, but what? I needed a stronger signal. She was breaking up again, and I needed better reception. Moving the radio outside the building might make a difference. It had to. My eyes fixed on the radio. The thin walls of the storage unit reverberated with echoes of a Rebecca's suffering. The cries were frantic now. She sounded like she was in pain. I had to help and get a clear message again and complete the last step. I seized the old radio and ran to the door. In my haste, I almost tripped, my foot slipping on a nearby book that had fallen. I caught myself before I fell, barely noticing the line of salt I had disturbed. My foot struck it, broke it, scattered traces everywhere. That was the moment everything changed. The pressure that followed was immense, an invisible weight that fell so fast and hard I could scarcely comprehend it. It was like the air itself was turning against me, suffocating me, squeezing the breath from my lungs. My mind raced but came up blank, terror-eclipsing thought. In my hands, the radio twisted. It was so sudden, so violent. I had no time to tighten my grip before it wrenched free, yanked by a force that was greater than anything I had ever known. I watched it fall in slow motion, as though the world had slowed down just to let me see the finality of it. Plastic and metal and wires, bright flashes of white and silver, shattered against the cracked floor. The noise was explosive, louder than thunder, an orchestra of destruction. The air quivered, the walls trembled. Then I felt it, a presence vast and oppressive. Something had been released, but it was not Rebecca. In that moment, it spoke to me, not words but a terrible buzzing feeling. It reminded me of the sound of thousands of insects, chittering all at once. A cold wind swept through the storage unit, rustling papers and making the pages of open books flutter wildly. Then I reeled at the thunderous proclamation of the real being that had escaped.
"I am hunger.
It roared.
I am the void between stars, the divine made manifest."
I stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of moldering cardboard boxes. The books inside spilled across the concrete floor, their pages opening to reveal more of those terrible symbols.
Clever little girl found me.
The voice continued, almost purring now.
So much knowledge in that pretty head. She thought she could commune with the divine, bind me to her will.
A sound like grinding glass that might have been laughter.
She was delicious, yet her voice.
The abyssal tones morphed into an eerie mimicry of Rebecca's own, lingering on each word.
Still taste the sweetest.
My back hit the storage unit door. I fumbled for the handle, while looking behind me, my eyes desperately searching for the source of the terrible voice.
She tried to keep me here. The bindings she placed were still effective in trapping me, starving me.
The voice from the radio declared,
But you have delivered me from this prison.
My limbs were heavy and my thoughts sluggish. Frost formed on the metal walls as the temperature plummeted. I tried to speak, but terror froze my tongue. I recalled the instructions to reverse the chalk markings, the odd vocalizations, taking the radio out, breaking the salt line. My stomach churned with the realization of my mistake. The ritual was never meant to free Rebecca. It had freed the thing that had killed her. The haunting voice rang out once more.
I thank you for freeing me, little thing. The reward for your service and my deliverance is your life. For now at least, I am sure I will see you again, soon.
The words coiled around me, leaving me frozen, haunted, and hollow. The presence in the room was gone in the next instant. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The world stood still, and all I could hear was that whisper, echoing over and over until it was the only thing left in my mind. The silence closed in on my mind as well, and I was alone. I stood in the doorway, burdened by the awful knowledge of what I had set loose upon the world. The shattered radio lay in pieces, a stark testament to my failure. I replayed every moment in my mind, each memory sharp and unforgiving. The enormity of what I had done settled over me like a suffocating fog. Since that day, nothing else has happened. I abandoned my position at deep storage without explanation, silently slipping into obscurity. There's a monstrous presence lurking somewhere now. Whatever it is, it knows me, and I'm acutely aware that my fleeting respite will soon crumble. I'm left to this solitary vigil, tormented by fear of what has been set loose.